Hi, and welcome to this short video today where we're going to be talking about the idea of concept attainment. It's a micro strategy that you can use to teach grammar as a concept in context for those world language teachers out there. It's a method that I learned about a few years ago, and I've tried every once in a while when it fits. There's certain grammatical concepts that make a little bit more sense with it. And it's a relatively straightforward process in terms of how to set it up and how to deliver the content. And kids really do get very involved in the learning of this. So let's do a quick little where it's from and kind of what it is before I kind of go through the steps and show you some examples. So the first thing you need to know about this is it comes from a sort of constructivist approach to learning, where there's not really a teacher directed center in terms of here is the information, learn it. It's a lot more social. We think of constructivism as a lot more social in that sense. So kids are doing a lot more of the work at this point. And so the image over here kind of gives you an idea actually really well of how this sort of lesson will be set up, where students are thinking, right? They're working together, they're working with the teacher, and it kind of creates this really nice, nice environment for learning. It also allows learners to connect with prior knowledge and that new sort of information they kind of are able to connect it to. So it's using, for example, in a world language classroom, it's words they've seen before, but we're connecting them in ways that haven't been connected before. There are four really good benefits. And so one of them is to be able to distinguish between relevant and irrelevant information. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. Having them observe, classify, and hypothesize, connecting newly attained concepts with old information. And this big one is thinking inductively. We think of grammar teaching as either deductive or inductive or somewhere in between. So this is a more of an inductive way of doing it. So there's four major steps to creating a concept attainment lesson. The first one is that the teacher's going to show a few slides with maybe some words or some phrases, and they tell students straight out, this is a yes example, this is a no example. And they don't say this is a yes because, this is a no because, and we don't say this is an example of subjunctive with doubt, this is an example of a feminine noun. We just call them yes, or we just call them no. And when there's no real explanation for it whatsoever, students know upfront that everything is going to be called yes or no, and they're going to follow along in suit. You can either display them one at a time, or you can display them all at once, depending on how you want to do it. So after the teacher says, this is a yes, this is a no, then we're going to move on to the students doing some of it. So the teacher is just going to show the examples, and students are then going to decide with a partner, is this yes or is this no? Why is this yes? Why is this no? And we're more interested in the talking about why is it yes, why is it no, and less interested in the it must be correct sort of mentality with it. The conversations, like we said before, learning is social. The students are going to keep track of those yes and no answers on a chart. That's really important. So they're not just seeing them and doing nothing with it. They're seeing them and doing something with it afterwards. And that something afterwards is they're going to rename them, because yes and no is not really a good sort of category for them. So they're going to say, all right, instead of calling this yes, all of these words seem to be talking about doubt. Or instead of calling this no, all of these words seem to be talking about habitual actions, and all of the yes ones seem to be talking about one-time actions, for example. And so now, instead of me getting up there and saying, this is how to use the subjunctive with doubt, these are expressions that use the preterite, these are expressions that use the imperfect, students have come up with those definitions on their own based on looking at the meaning of the words. So let me show you an example with visuals that's not world language specific and comes out of inspiration from a couple of places, from Cult of Pedagogy and from Madame Shepherd. So let's say that we were to look at Impressionist paintings. I know as a teacher that we're looking at Impressionism and what makes something Impressionist and what doesn't. And I could get up there and I could give you the full explanation of what is Impressionism. Here are all of the different the characteristics of this, but I feel like showing it will make a lot more sense. So imagine we're in a class and I show you this painting, we look at it for a minute, we maybe talk about it, and I say, this is an example of a yes. And then we move on and I show the second painting. And then I say, yeah, this is another example of a yes. Then I show our third painting and we talk about it, and I say, this is an example of a no. Followed by another one, this is another example of a no. So we have examples of yeses, we have examples of nos, and maybe I'll show them all at once, maybe I'll show them one at a time, depending on how I want to set it up. So these might be the four that me as the teacher, I will show students. Then they're kind of on their own or working with their partner to figure out the next one. So I'll show this painting. And I won't answer right away whether it's a yes or no. They will decide that will eventually be a yes. They'll see another painting, they'll work together to determine that that's a no. They're starting now at this point to use words to describe these paintings that weren't words that they would have been able to use before. Or should I say, we could describe these paintings and describe the style of these three paintings right here, but showing the difference between this yes and this no are going to make all of the difference in terms of them actually conceptually understanding it. We show another painting, it's going to be a no. Now we have another painting, it's a yes. We have another painting, another yes, and we end with a no. So then I can display all of these paintings at once, and we can talk about what are those characteristics that make something yes. Can you find a better way to describe those yeses? Then we have our no's. Can you find a better way to describe the no's? Or what makes it a no? How did you know it was a no? How did you know it was a yes? And then at the end, I can kind of fill in the gaps and be like, all of the yeses, we actually call those impressionist paintings. What you were able to pick up upon in terms of the styles, that's going to be a yes example, and those are impressionists. So in terms of how we bring that back to grammar teaching, these are the three ones that kind of stick out to me as the most obvious uses of concept attainment. Using it in terms of articles with our like early level students, the difference between un and una, or French teachers le versus la, all those sorts of things, un versus une. You can do that pretty simply by, once you start to kind of have them figure out the rules, instead of saying every noun that ends in o, or most that end here, right? Instead of having them do it that way, or giving them a chart where it's like, oh, if it ends in sion or if it ends in dad, like, no, have them figure it out on their own. It'll stick more in their brain. Subjunctive with doubt, which I'll show you that example for Spanish in a moment. That one works as well as expressions for preterite and imperfect or passé composé imparfait. You can see the expressions and how those expressions change in terms of the meaning, right? And you can talk about how that impacts like your statements. So here's a really quick example of what it looks like with grammar. So this is what I did with my level 3 students. To connect prior learning with new learning, they've already been exposed to the subjunctive in other ways, in other different forms, like recommendations and emotions and impersonal expressions, etc. And I would say most of the words that are in this presentation, they already knew anyways, but now we're kind of adding new learning to it by what does it mean? Why are all these words kind of clumped together? So I would show the expression no creo que, I don't believe that. And then I would tell them that that is an example of a yes. I, in hindsight, realized that this is confusing because it's, oh, this is actually doubt, but I'm calling it a yes. Hindsight, right? Dudo que, I doubt that. That's going to be an example of a yes. Pienso que, I think that is an example of a no. And then this is kind of where I stop and I say, all right, now it's your turn. I did those first 3 with you. I want you to figure out if you can do some of the other ones. So then we have no pienso que, I don't think that, followed by es verdad que, it's true that. No es verdad que is yeah, is a C. And I'm placing these purposely so they can see the difference between no es verdad que and es verdad que. Then we go es dudoso que, it's doubtful that. Es cierto que, it's true that. Es obvio que. Es falso que. And then I show them all at the end, and I've still called them only C or only no. And then they work together, and they find interesting ways of classifying it that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of on my own, which kind of makes it more relevant for them. They kept calling them in terms of like agree, like you agree with something or you disagree with something. And I thought that was a pretty clever way of expressing the same sort of concept of doubt, but it's more in words that they're more familiar with instead of talking about doubt necessarily. So then we talk about, okay, what did you name the C category? What did you name the no category? And then I fill in the gaps and I say, all right, this category here, we talk about how this is going to be subjunctive. And then we talk about this category here being the indicative or the present tense, right? So to kind of end this short video for you, just that same diagram, if we think about what the concept attainment model looks like, we have a lot of students thinking, students talking, students doing the thinking there, students working together, working with the teacher to give out their answers, and we start that cycle all over again. Noticing that my role as the teacher was really just to create this and ask questions and not to say, this is how you use it, and this is how we're going to use it. It's more of, all right, let's make this make sense to you. I hope this was helpful for you, and let me know if you have any questions.